Good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year, and welcome to our first Facebook Live of the 2021. Happy New Year, Orlando.
Thank you, Andrea. How was your New Year?
It was amazing. I had a blast with my kids and family, relatives that I didn't see for 10 years. I went to see them in Miami,
Cubaville.
Cubaville. And so I had a great time. And Happy New Year to our guest today is Ricardo Rodriguez. ¿Cómo
Hello.
estás?
Muy bien, muchas gracias. Feliz año. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Ricardo, and thanks for being with us here in our first Facebook Live of the
On
2020.
very short notice, I might add.
And a very short notice, yes. It was just yesterday. It was a little bit of change of plans, but you know what? It works out.
Right. I mean, we had announced on Facebook that we had a professional in the medical field, but as you know, hospitals are pretty full. COVID is creating quite a crisis in
The vaccine?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean hospitalizations. So,
Well, I know,
yeah.
but also.
So we were going to talk
this-
about COVID, right?
And the
then-
vaccines.
And we changed because our healthcare professional is overwhelmed. So anyway, thanks for accommodating us. But we're going to talk about something very important today, and that is Ricardo's a energy professional, has spent a number of years in the energy space, in the energy sector. I'm going to let Andrea introduce him formally in terms of his background, but I'm excited to talk about the difference between a market-driven energy solution to our energy needs and a government-driven, centralized Green New Deal, and how that compares with respect to the economy and with respect to jobs and with respect to technology. So, Andrea, you can introduce our dear friend Ricardo.
Ricardo Rodriguez is a very dear friend, long time friend, but also he is a senior advisor of ASG, and also he has an international experience in energy sector, so he is an expert in energy and business, but I'm going to let him talk about his background. Ricardo, well, thank you so much again, and thanks for being with us and a short notice that we were just yesterday having a meal with you, and we were talking about the program today, and you just said like, well, I'm more than happy to be with you guys.
Okay. Well, just quickly, I'm an engineer from Colorado School of Mines, and I got my MBA at University of Chicago, and then I did some postgrad in Switzerland. I started off in large infrastructure projects in Latin America, hydroelectric dams, subways, roads, etc. Then I joined the oil and gas industry here in Houston, and I quickly went international. I worked for Shell International Exploration and Production, mostly in London, in The Hague, and Houston, and traveling throughout all the oil provinces around the world. While in Shell, I was also responsible for some of the what we call renewable sectors of the company, such as solar, hydrogen, and several other biomass initiatives that we had. After leaving Shell and retiring from Shell, I became the CEO of BioVerda, one of the largest biofuel producers in the United States. And after we sold BioVerda into a bigger consortium, I became a partner, a senior partner at Albright Stonebridge Group, and we are basically international commercial diplomats. We help our customers enter new markets and do better in their markets. That's essentially it.
And when you say Albright, we're obviously talking about the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, who
yes.
has a vast experience on international issues, and I believe served as Secretary of State under the Clinton administration.
That's correct.
Yep. So you also have we have a friend in common, and that's Carlos Gutierrez. We were talking about him the other day. Carlos was the former Secretary of Commerce for the United States under President George W. Bush. It's a very interesting story. Carlos is a fellow Cubano, born in Cuba, but spent a lot of time in Mexico, studied in Mexico, if I recall, and
Yes, after the Gutierrez family left Havana under the old Castro conditions, they ended up in Miami, and since Carlos's father had a small pineapple farm just outside of Havana, Dole out of New York hired him and brought him to New York. And after a few years there, they sent him as head of Latin America with a headquarters in Mexico City, where Carlos went to the American School in Mexico City, and he and I have known each other ever since.
Yeah, and Carlos, of course, became the CEO of Kellogg, which is the huge international cereal company, and was tapped by President George W. Bush. What's interesting about it and how I got to know Carlos is in 2001 when I ran for mayor of Houston. The administration sent Carlos down to talk to the Hispanic community in Houston, and he was gracious enough to come down and
Support you.
you support me and talk about the importance of business and particularly micro business, small business, and the significance of the growing Hispanic entrepreneur community. So that's our friend in common.
And the story was, I mean, amazing. You guys were talking about the story about how he started and how he became the CEO of that company, and I was wow. Those are the kind of stories that you want to hear. You know Carlos Gutierrez, the big guy, but you don't know what is behind that.
Right.
And I just learned that yesterday
Yeah.
because you guys were talking about it. So
Yeah.
that was amazing.
Yeah, but it's great to have CEOs and business leaders like Ricardo and Carlos, and hopefully someday we'll have Carlos on the program either via Zoom or in person, and maybe Ricardo can help us with that.
Yeah.
But Ricardo, let's go back. I think today we want to focus a little bit on energy and what I call market-driven energy and top-down, central government sponsored energy. Having come from the University of Chicago, you remember the famous economist Milton Friedman, right? And,
Amongst many others who I studied under.
Yeah, and
Miller and Cozy and a few others.
Yeah, exactly. And nothing better for innovation and optimization than the free market, in my opinion. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. But what we have today in the Politburo, the Congress of the United States, is a government-driven initiative to drastically change energy policy in the United States, not by what works best with respect to the free market, but what government believes is the best, and that government will dictate what jobs in the energy sector we will have. And that's, of course, the Green New Deal. Have you given thought to that? I know you've been involved in biomass and alternative energies and hydrogen, but explain to us from an economic perspective a government forcing us to go into the Green New Deal versus what we have now, which is a combination of development of alternative fuels, but a reliance on the fossil fuels that we have.
Yeah, sure. From an economic point of view, when the government mandates something to society or to the market, it's basically like imposing a tax on the market. When you impose a tax, you misuse resources and you reduce the productivity of what can be done. I'll give you a practical example. Many years ago, when you and I, and not Andrea, but when you and I were in our young teens, the government mandated that cars might improve efficiency from 10 miles per gallon to 20 miles per gallon, or somewhere in that field. And the American car companies, Ford, Chevrolet, Chrysler, said, wait a second, you're mandating something on me that I can't do in 10 years. But then, meanwhile, around the world, in Japan, they were producing smaller, more efficient cars that produced higher energy, higher mileage delivery. And then Chevrolet and Chrysler and General Motors started losing market share within the United States. Once they started losing market share in the United States, they said, wait a second, we have to do something about this. So they went about it in a market way. They, first of all, focused on engine efficiency. So they made the engines more efficient, and they did all these electronics and computerized stuff. Then they focused on materials that made them lighter, and so forth and so on. In other words, 50, 60 years ago, when the government mandated better mileage, it went nowhere. But when the American car manufacturers and others felt the Japanese competition coming in, the market worked, and it led to innovation and better technology and and higher mileage. The same thing is going to happen in the green new world, if you will. If we get a mandate, it's a tax that leads to inefficiency, the bad use of resources, and the lack of productivity. If we let the market work, it's going to be the best for all of us.
And just to give you an example, how I see it, I think the government will mandate a thermostat setting, let's say, and then, but you're free to, if the government says in the wintertime you have to set your thermostat at 65, but you like it at 72, and the government says, here, this is how much your house should consume at 65 based on the square footage. But if you go to 72, we're going to impose, let's say, a carbon tax, or, that's the Politburo telling us, yeah, you can go ahead and spend that, and you can for a few months until you can't afford it anymore. So the government is taking your ability to choose in the free market by imposing a tax, as he says. Of course, when you take that money out of the market and give it to the government, then there's less dollars in the society for innovation and creativity, and it's never good to have the government driving the economy.
So, Ricardo,
Essentially, taxes lower demand and therefore lower supply.
Correct.
these topics are like very complex for many people. Like for you probably it's like like breakfast every day. You understand perfectly that. But I want to talk to our people over there, that they're the viewers that don't understand this oil and gas war very well, or the economy, or the impact of the new government and the regulations. So let's talk about in terms of jobs, how this new green era or the new administration will change the game. We know that oil and gas industry is already being hit by all the changes, and the oil barrel went drop, and a lot of jobs being many people being laid off and things like that. What we expect?
Well, first of all, we have to find the right balance of energy sources based on consumption and demand. All right. If we become unilateral, as we say, in other words, if we say everything has to be green by 2030 or 2050, that is a mandate, that is a tax, that is leading to inefficiency, that is leading to loss of jobs, that is leading to misallocation of resources. We don't want that. Now, is there a big space for green technologies? For sure. Now, if you let the market work, there's going to be a shift from oil and gas workers over into the green sector. What do they have in common? Both of them are major projects which require engineering, planning, certain technical skills.
Capital risk. Risk and capital.
Risk management, capital allocation,
Right.
capital raising, and so forth and so on. So the oil sector has a very synergistic relationship with the green sector. As a matter of fact, the biggest producers of green technologies and consumers of green technologies are the large oil companies. If you look at Exxon, Shell, Chevron, BP, look at their green initiatives, starting from hydrogen, biomass, solar, etc., etc., etc. So it's a shift from oil and gas into energy production with other sources. Are there going to be dislocations? In other words, there's going to be gaps and peaks and valleys in employment and salary levels? Of course. But it'll work out over time.
As long as they're driven by the market and not by government.
Correct.
Yeah.
Government equal tax, tax equal less.
And, as Andrea said, let's bring it back to Texas. Texas is very oil dependent.
Mm-hmm.
We have quite an extensive offshore line that is Texas territory as compared to other states. We have a lot of offshore drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. But we also have a lot of terrestrial on land drilling, the Permian Basin, which extends in West Texas over into New Mexico. And the Eagle Ford Shale is, and then down in South Texas near Starr County.
Yep.
From a political perspective, I was thinking this morning, since we were going to have Ricardo on the program, how shocked a lot of Texas Democrats were when Starr County in Texas went Republican. They went Republican, but a lot of people don't understand, is because the energy jobs were being threatened. And so many people in Starr County depend on whether they're, you know, drivers of trucks that go retrieve the crude, driving them to the, you know, drop-off point for the pipeline, whether people are working on the platforms, whether they're manufacturing pipe. The majority of the population in Starr County is dependent on the energy sector. And when that was threatened, people always vote their pocketbooks. And, you know, while I'm all for diversified energy sources, I am not for the government setting the standards. In other words, I think that we ought to let, you know, it's like the Paris Accord. I was thinking the other day, I was flying over Denver. In the 1980s, Ricardo, you could fly into Denver, and there was an orange haze over the city. I mean, it was a heavily polluted city. Even Houston was under EPA mandates because we were called what's called a non-attainment area. Our pollution levels were pretty high. If you fly into Denver today on any given day, it's crystal clear.
Yep.
And we have the Paris Accord, where, you know, we agree to all these standards, but it imposes tremendous restrictions on us. And if you go to China, or if you go to Asia, I mean, you can't even see. The air is so polluted. Environmentally, the rivers are in bad shape. So, you know, again, it's about fair play. Don't impose, you know, a taxation system and these carbon offsets on the American people and the American taxpayer, you know, to benefit the rest of the world.
Indeed, the issue with the Paris Accord is mostly that the United States signed on to an agreement in which they basically said, we'll let China and India pollute more than we do for the next 20, 30, 50 years because we polluted in the past 50 years.
Right.
So it's putting the brakes on the United States and letting China and India go off and do whatever they essentially want. That is the issue with the Paris Accord.
Right.
The vision of the Paris Accord is fine, but the strategy is wrong.
Well, and from an economic perspective, when you have these environmental regulations that are put on our manufacturing industry in the United States, it drives up the cost of the product because you've got to install, you know, whether it's scrubbers or, you know, industrial environmental modifications. And emerging economies like India and China don't have to do that. We're at a competitive disadvantage, are we not? So we're often wondering, well, why did the American jobs go overseas? Well, it's a hell of a lot cheaper to produce in China and now India than it is in the United States.
Yes.
And we're at an economic disadvantage, and you need to understand that. We're all for a level playing field. I'm for that. But I'm not willing to risk American jobs in Starr County and Hidalgo County and Maverick County and all across the 254 counties in Texas to help a foreign country.
You know, it's always like, I always say, nothing is for free. And when I say nothing is for free, we have to pay a price for something. So what is the price that we need to pay to, you know, for the better impact in the environment that we've been talking about, go green and recycling and all of those things. But behind that, it's a lot of issues behind that, and we're paying the price also. So, Ricardo, put us in a perspective, the cons and the, like, what is the price that we need to pay to go green for the better impact in the environment, but at the same time we're paying a price on jobs and the economy. And it hit a point, I don't know if we're going to be alive to see this. It's going to be a point probably that we're all going to be green, that everything is going to be recycling and eco and all of this era that we're living now.
Back to economics a little bit. If we just focus on price or cost, we're not getting the whole picture. We talk about value creation or value destruction. Cost is one of the elements. Price is another element. Now, we reflect all that through price. Now, if we know that green is going to be good over the next 30, 50 years, it becomes an investment opportunity where I can create value and capture value for me, myself, my employees, my shareholders, and everybody else around me. So it's not a cost or a price. It's a what is the investment characteristic of it, and can we create value from it?
Mm.
If you force me into spending and I'm not creating value, once again we fall into that's a tax. Tax is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Some tax is good. Too much tax is very bad. Okay.
Yeah, just to simplify it, it sort of reminds me that at the turn of the century, our mode of transportation was, horseback and, you know, horse-driven carriages.
Mm-hmm.
1918, that era around there, in the early 1900s, the Wright brothers started experimenting with aircraft, and it was the market, not government, that says, hey, we need to go because there's too much equine excrement on the trails, and we need to go to aircraft. No, people risking their capital manufactured a flying machine, and the next thing you know, in less than 40 years, we go from horse-driven carriages to flight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that wasn't a government mandate. That was research, investment, development, and so that's why I believe that the market is a free market is a beautiful thing.
True.
Yeah.
Even going a little bit either further in history, New England used to light up their homes with whale oil.
Correct.
Then in Pennsylvania they discovered oil and we produced kerosene, and therefore Rockefeller and so forth. And kerosene lasted for a very short period of time. Then we created gasolines and diesels and natural gas for energy. Now we're moving over into all types of, if you want to call green technologies, to produce power and for the transport of vehicles. So the natural evolution by the market is the best and most productive.
Now, but Ricardo, though, some will argue that let's just take Tesla, Elon Musk.
I was gonna talk about that. Yeah.
Right. Some will argue there's not a snowball's chance in hell Tesla would have succeeded were it not for the government subsidies. The same subsidies that they offer to wind-driven turbines. What are your thoughts on that? In other words, because I want to argue the other side. Can the government create incentives to stimulate, expedite the development of alternative fuels?
Interestingly enough, once again, talking economically and financially, and if we look at risk of development and implementation over time, if it takes me 30 years to invent something and implement it, nobody with a financial reasonable mind is going to do it. Therefore, we need society to do it, and we do it through government. So the United States government invested in nuclear, including nuclear bombs and so forth.
But you're talking about
years
power.
ago, yeah. They spent tax dollar money simulating and taking the risk of developing all the nuclear sector. Once it matures to a certain point, then the free market took over. But that type of development is only for the privileged countries. In other words, like Europe, China today, Japan once in a while, and the United States. You don't see African or Latin American or Southeast Asian countries developing any of the new super technologies that are coming along.
Correct.
So there's an element of subsidy by the government to the market related to the risk of developing a technology and how long it will take to develop that technology.
Yeah.
And we're having Tesla moving to Texas.
Yes.
And we're having other companies that they just announced that they're going to move to Texas.
Hewlett Packard
Mm-hmm. Here in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
But many are going to move to Austin. So how do you see all this wave of companies moving, and not only companies, but people from California, from New York, from Illinois, moving to Texas, and these companies, talking about technology and talking about an alternative for cars and things like that.
And before you answer that question, there's something going around on the internet on Facebook says that the governor has shut Texas down, but Oklahoma's still open for the folks in California.
and Kansas.
Mandatory.
Yeah. Once again, beautiful California, which it is increasing tax burden on people and companies. Too much tax is bad, and therefore, if you're paying too much tax in California and it's cheaper to move to Texas, that's what you do. That's what we're seeing.
Hmm.
All these major technology companies, high value producing companies, high value added companies, are moving to Texas, which is good. Texas is still what we call a can-do state. If you tell a Texan you can't do this,
They'll prove you
start
wrong.
you
Yeah.
start a mini revolution.
You're telling that person, do it.
Yeah.
So, well, in a political perspective, Orlando, how do you see? I mean, you've been in politics more than 25 years. How do you see this wave, of people from those kind of states moving to Texas that were very conservative here?
Well, I mean, that is a concern. Obviously, and everybody knows this. They say don't California or Texas because the California voter tends to be a little more progressive, more liberal. California didn't start off that way, of course, as Nixon and Ronald Reagan and Schwarzenegger and other well-known Republicans originated from California. California used to be a fairly conservative state from an economic perspective, but somehow they went off the rails, kind of like New York. I'll tell you that New York, for example, interesting story, just to give you a little history. During the Constitutional Convention that had to be ratified, New York was one of the last states that signed on to the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. Their concern was a strong, big central government. New York was fairly rural at the time, very agrarian, and the farmers that they were the delegation that went to the Constitutional Convention in New York, fought vehemently. In fact, it was New York that, with other states, that fought for the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. And I think to myself, how far New York has fallen, in those years. They're high tax, high regulation, big central government. They've gone broke before, right around the time that Mayor Dinkins in New York. I mean, New York filed for bankruptcy. And it was not just New York. California is on the verge of filing for bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
We have cities that have filed for bankruptcy. And mostly, I will say, under the leadership of the Democrats and the leftist Democrats that think that taxes are good and that everyone should be taxed to the hilt and that government can produce everything. I mean, those of us Latinos, and, where were you born? Are you an immigrant too?
I was born in Boston.
Boston. Well,
He's a gringo.
he's a gringo.
My father is Mexican who studied there, and my mother is an Irish Catholic.
Gotcha.
Latino.
But this is the big concern of us Latino immigrants, and we don't have to just be immigrants. There's a lot of concern for Latinos. Is that our jobs are being risked, but more importantly, those of us from Colombia and from Peru and from Bolivia and from Venezuela and even now in Mexico with AMLO, we see what socialism does to an economy, and it's quite frightening. A lot of the left, leaning Democrats in this country that are native born think, oh yeah, it's an innocuous democratic socialism like Europe, and I can't, those of us that are immigrants from communist socialist countries, we're like, are you kidding me? We've seen this movie before, and that's comes back to the issue of the government driving a huge part of our economy, which is the energy sector, through the Green New Deal, which, AOC really loves, and now Mr. Kerry and our new president-elect will be supporting.
And I think it's a big concern, and we've been talking about this, Ricardo. We've been friends for many, many years, and we've been, supporting you and when you were running for your positions, previous positions, and we always say we need to encourage the Latinos to vote, to do the right thing. But my biggest concern now it's if we're gonna have people from these liberal states coming here, what is going to happen. You know, everything that we've been building in this state, everything that we've been trying to keep at a conservative level. I mean, it's like we're going to go backwards.
Well, I mean, you're already seeing it, Andrea. I mean, if you look at the election results in 2020, November 2020, which our PAC was very involved in, you've seen the changes already in the urban areas. Dallas, Fort Worth, Bexar County, Harris County, Travis County, the major urban centers have gone left. I mean, you know, these people are sitting at the edge of their seat waiting for, for example, here, Mayor Turner and Lena Hidalgo tell us now that we have to shut down our restaurants and places of businesses, or if not shut down, we have to go from 75% to 50% capacity, which, you know, our small businesses are already broke. This is government dictating the free market, how you and I are going to exchange our resources for the purchase of goods. Government has no business shutting down the economy. The responsibility of government, working with our scientists and our medical institutions, is to gather the facts and disseminate the fact. In other words, inform the people that, you know, masks, by the way, I like my Mexican mask. Masks do work, that social distancing, proper hygiene works. But that should be the extent of the government regulation and letting people make their choices. But no, we've shut down schools. We're shutting down the economy today. You know, our young county judge has decided that it's appropriate to, you know, begin to shut down businesses, and that's just inappropriate for me. And so, to answer your question, we're already seeing it. The only thing that saved us, and I'll repeat it because, you know, I said it last year, were the conservative Hispanics in South Texas, in Starr County and Maverick County, Hidalgo County, and other rural parts of Texas that saved us. That's why we kept the state conservative, a business-oriented government.
Correct. And, you know, as we woke up this morning, you know, we were seeing what happened in Georgia. And it was pretty similar of what is start happening here in Texas.
Yeah.
And I was seeing the map, and again, it was the cities, the big cities, it was, they turned blue.
Yep.
And the other small rural areas, like you were mentioning, like here in Texas, they're still red.
Yeah. But that brings up an interesting point, Ricardo. You know, we're a political action committee, and we are, somebody's phone keeps going off. Sorry about that. We're in the business of encouraging Latinos to vote and to vote conservative. And this is simply a comparison. Congratulations to the African American community. They just elected an African American far leftist out of the state of Georgia to the U.S. Senate. That'll help, you know, the leftists. And I'm not saying all Democrats are leftists. There's good Democrats. You know,
They're conservative Democrats.
They're very conservative Democrats. Yeah. I mean, I remember, and I'll say my dear friend Mark White, former governor of Texas, I would consider him a good business-oriented, you know, conservative Democrat, but had some very social liberal views. That's fine. But today's left is completely different. But hats off, congratulations to the African-American community. In the state of Texas, with a growing Latino population, the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas is an African-American, Alan West, a, you know, well-decorated military guy for whom I have a lot of respect. But, in my opinion, you know, there should have been participation by the Latino community. We talk about this because as candidates go throughout the state of Texas, Hispanic candidates did far better in the Democratic Party than did in the Republican Party. And I'm saying this to everybody watching because a lot of people always ask me, well, how come Hispanics aren't voting, or how come Hispanics aren't participating in the conservative movement at the level they should? I mean, it's if you don't have Hispanic candidates on the ballot, and you're not supporting Hispanic candidates, you're not promoting Hispanic candidates, you know, where's the bulk of the Hispanic candidates is on the Democratic side. So we as conservatives and the Republican Party has a lot of work to do. When we put up conservative Latinos, and I'll mention this, like our great Supreme Court Justice Eva Guzman, she's the highest vote getter in the state of Texas. And so we don't get it. So we've got to encourage as a party more participation by conservative Latinos across the state, because the only opportunity to save this state from a political perspective and the growth area in terms of demographics in Texas is the Latino community. The African American community is not growing. They're static or decreasing. The elderly Caucasian
But they
community...
never keep quiet. That's the thing.
No, but that's okay.
And we keep quiet.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
And so that's why we need to invest in the conservative Latino movement. That's exactly what our Political Action Committee and our LLC does. We are a nonprofit that educates the Latino community. We train young Hispanics that are business graduates and lawyers and doctors and architects and engineers to get more involved in the political process. But that's how, to answer your question, how we'll save the state of Texas and keep it pro-business.
How do you see it in the perspective of being a businessman and being a Latino, but also, you know, you were born in this country, but you are a son of immigrants, and most of our friends are Latinos, you know, but you always vote, and I know you always vote, and most of our friends vote.
And you vote conservative, don't you?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to get you into the political opinion portion of the program now.
Because he's a businessman. He's not a politician. He's a businessman. He's part of the community.
But he works with a lot of politicians.
But you know, so how do you see as part of the community, as being a Latino and a business person? What do you think that we need to do? Because, you know, we've been seeing, as you said, the African American community, you know, static, but they don't keep quiet. They talk. And the problem with us is we grow, I always say, like, we grow like rabbits, but we keep quiet.
Yeah.
Well, Ronald Reagan comes to mind, and in one of his speeches he said, basically, Latin Americans in the United States are naturally Republican. They believe in family, hard work, and not asking for favors. But that message is great, but it has not. We have done nothing with that message. In my opinion, since generalizing the Hispanic population of, let's focus on Texas, of Texas is concentrated in certain parts of the state, they never mixed sufficiently with the white people and the Hispanics. The white people tended to be more Republican, and the Hispanics felt like a little bit left out, so they would go to the left where they had some comprehension by the Democrats. I understand how you feel.
On social justice issues,
Yes.
too, particularly in the 60s.
But on the other hand, if you will, the white Republican side did not give them much access soon enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there starts a dichotomy. As time goes by, and the Hispanic wealth in Texas has grown tremendously. Look at the small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the small towns. Look at the whatever you want to look. The Hispanics are making the state grow as well, and they do it through hard work.
Mm-hmm.
If we can let them know that, as a Republican, that their hard work is what Republican Party stands for. If you let them know that we're for small government and we're not going to take a whole bunch of stuff away from you to give it to someone else. If we start inviting them to senior positions within the party or in government,
Or
so forth,
encouraging
so on,
them and educating them on how to run for office, which is what we do.
then you're going to have a natural Hispanic mindset becoming overtly Republican.
Correct. Yeah, and it's a matter of investment, and that's why I was saying, I mean, I
The
don't want to...
Democratic Party has been doing a great job
For a
on
long,
that.
long time,
Yeah.
but they talk a good game. They often don't deliver, and you know, unfortunately, they find people like AOC or Warnock that just got elected, and you know, I mean, these are bomb throwers. They're leftist bomb throwers, and the liberal Democrats love that. But we, as conservatives, we as a Republican Party in Texas, need to be investing in young people that are well educated, that are business oriented, market driven, freedom loving, candidates to run for office. There is a multiplicity of them in counties throughout Texas. I'm just amazed. You know, we go back to our dear friend Alfredo Arellano down in Maverick County, who was the chairman of the Republican Party of Maverick County. I mean, This is a conservative young man who's done tremendous work down in South Texas. I remember our race for mayor in 2001. We doubled the Hispanic vote, and I garnered 75% of the Latino vote in Texas. I mean, so, and it's frustrating, for example, here in Harris County, when we had a vacancy in the district, in the county clerk's office. Remember, we promoted a young, talented Latina, and the executive committee of the Republican Party chose an elderly but little Caucasian former elected official. That's not a formula for growth. I'm sorry, I'm being a little critical, but I'm being very honest today. We don't have much to look forward to in politics in the conservative Republican movement, especially in 2021, given what's happened at the national election. I mean, we've lost the executive branch. We don't have Congress, and we're about to lose the U.S. Senate. So all we have is Texas. And the only growth in Texas, the only opportunity to keep Texas business-oriented, freedom-loving, conservative, is the Latino community. I'm sorry, there's no other demographic that's growing, and our party doesn't seem to get it yet.
And you know what? And that's good what you pointed out, Orlando, because it started for the party or people like in the party like you to admit it. The biggest mistake that the party is being done in the past with our community, for our community to realize, you know what? Okay, if it's like when you have when you're an alcoholic or when you have a problem, the first thing that you need to do to move on is to admit it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you cannot correct anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, again, we did an analysis at the PAC, Ricardo, of the candidates in the state of Texas. It was embarrassing if you look at the total number of Democrats that run and the number of conservative Latinos that run. And on the victory side, I think like 47% of their candidates won, and only 16% of our Latino conservative candidates won. So, it's like the Houston Texans or a football team. I mean, look at the statistics. It doesn't require a very in-depth analysis to know that if you put up an attractive, young, conservative Latino, Latinos in Texas are going to pay attention. They're going to hear that person. They may be bicultural, they may be bilingual, but the important thing is they're conservative. They fit the norms of the state of Texas, which is business-oriented, freedom-loving, limited government, and that's what we need to do. It's the only growth area in which the conservatives have a chance to keep the state red.
I don't know if, you noticed it when I went to vote, Ricardo, and you went to vote, and then it was a big part of the judges. It was like 9 judges or something like that, and it was only in the Democratic Party. It was nobody against them.
Uncontested.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. This was a county that Harris County was red, as you know, for many years. I served as county treasurer for 12 years. And I attended many of the executive committee meetings of the Republican Party. The executive committee is the leadership of the local county parties. Here in Harris County, and I mentioned this years and years ago, I was amazed at the dearth of diversity in the Republican Party of Harris County. And I started pointing that out years ago to the leadership. And it was, we noticed that we need to do a better job of outreach. And so they'd hire a young Hispanic guy with a clipboard to go out and guys, that's not going to do it. And it didn't work. And so, 2018 came around, boom, the sweep. And now, in Harris County, conservatives lose by an average of between 120,000 to 100,000 votes. We've got a lot of ground to make up. Can we make it up? Absolutely. But we've got to make the investment.
So what will be the part, for example, I want to put you on the spot, like you as a businessman in Latino, and we have, most of our friends are business owners. What would be our part, starting from you and starting from the people that we know close to us, and then spread the word?
In other words, what would be a strategy, Ricardo? What can we do? You're you're a participant, but an observer of politics in this country. You're bicultural, bilingual. Um, what can the conservative movement do to engage and activate the growing Latino community?
Well, let's focus on Texas and let's focus even further on Houston. The first thing I notice from the many Latin American or Hispanics or Mexican Americans that live in Houston and have their own business is that they have an emotional animosity towards the Republicans. But when you go through the facts with them, they say, "Oh, I did not know that."
Right.
Right. So
Education.
the emotional part of it is going to be hard work and befriend them, bring them over, let them feel part of the whole situation.
No, don't bring them over. We go there. We never go there.
Okay, we go there.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meet more often with them,
Exactly.
and just go over, economics, policy, where it's taking us. Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it not? And you're going to realize that most Latin American or Hispanics in Houston and Texas think like Republicans.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But
they have an animosity towards, with all due respect to everybody, the white crowd that kept me away for so many years.
well, and a lot of that is driven by the media. But I'm going to say, Ricardo, one thing about us as Latinos is we're often saying, well, the Republicans need to invite us to reach out. No, they don't. We need to get involved. We need to take over. We need
Yeah.
people like Ricardo, who's bilingual, to go out to the communities, to go to Empresarios Latino, to go to the Hispanic Chamber, to go to civic clubs throughout the city. Roll up your sleeves, and you can do a better job, in my opinion, than some politician explaining the differences between conservatism and liberals. And so, personally, I'm making an appeal to you, Ricardo, and all your friends, to do that. You don't have to be an elected. I remember a guy by the name of Rob Mossbacher here in Houston who lost a race for mayor. And when he lost the race for mayor, he gave his concession speech. And in that speech, he said something that was he says, you don't have to hold elective office to make a difference in your community. And that's my appeal to the Hispanic conservative community. You don't have to be an elected official. You don't have to be a precinct chair. But you can go to your church. You can talk in your family gatherings. And like Ricardo says, talk about values. Talk about the values of liberalism, what's happened in Venezuela, what's happening in Mexico, what happens in Bolivia, what happened in Cuba, versus how well we have it here. The opportunities that our children have to advance through education. The medical technology, we're the leader in development of drugs. I ask my friends all the time that love socialism, what has, even our Spanish friends in Spain, what has Spain developed in the last 50, 60 years that has benefited the world? What has Cuba contributed to the world? Absolutely nothing. These are socialist-leaning governments. And even our friends down south, Mexico could be such an economic force in the world, but they're not developers. It's like China. They're starting to realize that. China is what scares me, is they're becoming more innovative, rather than being copiers of technology, they're becoming innovators of technology. They're copying our model where we were, what made us great, and that's concerning. So my appeal is to the Latino community, don't wait to get an invitation from somebody in the Republican Party or the conservative movement in Texas. Get involved. Go talk to your church, talk to your civic club, talk to your family, talk to your business leaders. If you're a member of the Hispanic Chamber, Empresarios Latinos, you have a voice. You should be the leader.
And definitely, we need to do a lot. We started with the pack, working last year, and we did a really fantastic job. But it's a lot work to do.
A lot of work, a lot of resources. This isn't free.
Yeah, nothing is for free, I said that.
This is not. These are lovely studios. We have great equipment. We have improved our technology. We do this every week for you. We try to educate you on a variety of issues and bring in different guests and talk about the real important issues. But none of this is free. It's not given to us. People aren't, Mosier Media, where we are today, they're not donating their space. Even though they're conservatives and they've given us a break, but we got to pay for it. And so it's expensive, but it's worth the investment because that's our opportunity. The only opportunity we have for growth for Texas conservatives is in the Latino community. I mean, I hate to say that, but the demographics prove it out.
Yes, so that's why we encourage you to go and visit us online at Texas. Have Texas Red, and also with the help of people like Ricardo and all our friends, the Latino friends, the business owners. And I was getting calls yesterday from restaurant owners, some of our friends that they were concerned about what they were talking about shutting down again. And that industry was last year was hit very very bad. All our people, the Latino community works in the restaurants, in the service, hotels, restaurant, they're waiters, they're managers, they're like, everybody was so afraid yesterday. I was getting a lot of calls. They're like, Andrea, what is going on? I and they've been hearing that California shut down, Illinois shut down, New York shut down, and now like seeing that this is coming to Texas again.
And what's interesting, Ricardo, is the states with the most draconian, policies with respect to COVID response, like New York and California, are the ones with the worst numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're having spikes, but we're not California. And
or
so,
New York.
Yeah, But yeah, Andrea's right. Go to our website, TexasLatinoConservatives.com. Hit the donate button, learn more about us. Campaign manager, learn how to talk to the press. Get involved. We have another Leadership Latino class coming up, hopefully in February. Just go to the Leadership Latino web link on our website, and we'll be posting the date. It's free. Just sign up, and we will, And by the way, our graduates have done very well.
Oh my God!
Our
yes.
graduates have been elected to office. They're running campaigns. They're
going to
working.
start running campaigns now.
They've won city council races in Pearland, Texas. We focused on 25 legislative races in Texas, Ricardo, because it was an important year for us. We had to make sure that we kept the Texas legislature red because we get to redistrict. So we focused on 25 districts in Texas. We won 15 of those. And I say we won, a lot of other PACs did contribute to the cause, but we were a small portion of that. But our portion was limited to focusing on what we called conservative but low propensity Hispanics. These are Hispanics that had voted conservative before, but it somehow or another, because they weren't touched or reached out to or motivated, kind of fell off the electoral map. So we re-engaged them by texting them, by doing teletown halls, by doing digital, by mailing them, by block walking. And in many of those districts, those voters made the difference between victory and defeat.
Yep.
And so that's what we want to do. We've got to expand that. These people down in the valley, in Starr County, Hidalgo County, Maverick County, all these counties that had an increased Latino participation in the Republican Party, they need to be reached. They need to be touched. We need to continue the dialogue. It's not good enough for them to just vote in 2020 and then we go away for 2 or 4 years.
No.
That's not going to work.
No.
So that's what we're doing. It's all on the webpage, and hopefully you'll donate or get involved.
And as I told few of the candidates, Latino candidates, I said, like, don't wait till the campaign time. I said, you should campaign every single day.
Correct.
So that's very important. And we also need to participate every single day, like, pongámonos la camiseta.
La playera.
La playera. Aquí vivimos y hagamos de este país y de este estado y de esta ciudad y de este condado lo mejor que podamos hacer. Porque está, como dijiste, en nuestras manos.
De acuerdo. Bueno,
Ricardo, gracias.
Yeah, mil gracias.
Just want to say something, now that you mentioned New York and California. if you look at the states that have underperformed in terms of COVID and economics, there's one common characteristic. We have what we call an emperor governor,
Mhm.
which is telling you what to do, as opposed to a Texas governor, which listens and does what people
Yeah.
want to do.
Well, we have an emperor, mayor, and county judge here in Harris County who, are chomping at the bit to get to the podium and announce that you can't operate your business anymore. I was actually watching the local news last night, and a female-owned business, small business in Fort Bend County said, not only no, but hell no, we're not shutting down. We, we, we barely made it last time.
Yeah.
I'm sure as hell not going to have the government telling me. And so they're going to stay open. It's going to be very curious. And what happens. And,
Yeah.
I think
welcome
this
to
is
2021.
Thi-
Happy New Year.
I think people need to take charge. If we're liberty-loving individuals that value our, making decisions for ourselves and our family, you've got to be vocal. You've got to be vocal. I mean, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not. But I think, the imperial local government can't shut you down and shouldn't shut you down. That's my opinion. But anyway, Ricardo, thank you. Thank you for
guys.
coming and talking to us about the differences between a free-driven market economy with respect to energy and, the emperor model, which is AOC, Mr. Kerry and Mr. Biden. It's going to be real interesting to see how Biden handles all this because he's going to be under pressure from the far left. But he understands that, that's not what drives the economy. So it's going to be interesting. I just hope he has the mental capacity to survive 48 months because he sure as hell seems pretty weak to
The
me.
question becomes how many effective hours per day can he perform?
Yeah, exactly.
And as what we were talking before we went to the air, like everybody was saying, oh, I was so, I couldn't wait for the 2020 to be in. I said, like, be careful what you wish.
Yep.
Because 2021, who knows what is going to happen.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to wish you a very prosperous 2021. If you're a small business, I hope it's better for you. I do believe that, based on what I've read, I'm certainly no scientist, that they say by the middle of January we'll have peaked in terms of mortality and the spreading of the virus. Hopefully the vaccine works. And, we'll reach a point where there's enough of the population that is starting to reach the necessary numbers for what they call herd immunity. And so the virus will have a tougher time spreading. So hopefully we'll get that under control. I'm wishing you and your family a very successful 2021. Continue to ask you to stay involved civically for the Latinos. Participen. El futuro de sus hijos es muy importante para dejar que otros determinen cómo vamos a vivir, que los izquierdistas nos digan o hagan de este país y nuestra economía lo que hicieron en Cuba, en Venezuela, en
Como la canción,
Bolivia.
como la canción, ¿cómo y cuánto?
Claro, claro. Así que, bueno, Andrea, te doy la última palabra.
Pues gracias, Ricardo. Y qué bueno verlos de nuevo en el 2021. And, pues los
It's
deseo.
good to be seen.
Sí, it's good to be seen. Y nos vemos el próximo miércoles aquí en TLC Live. We'll see you guys next Wednesday on TLC Live. And I wish you a very, very good 2021. Stay healthy and don't keep quiet because that's going to make a difference. Bye-bye. See you
See you
next
guys
Wednesday.
next week.